I'm a kind of person that is not supposed to exist at all at this moment, of a country that hardly had any chance to exist or survive. By myself, I have to quote, there is a very smart man in Russia, their foreign minister Lavrov, who says, post-Soviet space is one big spiritual sphere with only one anomaly, the Georgian government. So I represent anomaly, my existence is anomaly, my country is in many ways anomaly, because in 2008, and it's good that there is no map here because it would be too scary, 100-something times more bigger country attacked my small country. And they've been attacking different countries in their history. They've attacked Czechoslovakia in 1968. Czechoslovak government fell within hours and had to sign a humiliating defeat. They attacked Hungary in 1956, and Hungarian president was hanged by the occupiers. They went into Afghanistan, killed the president in 1 hour. And Afghanistan is a much bigger country than Georgia in 1979. And they've done other things, some of which are very little known. They've done coup d'etats, regime change, etc., all around the world, from Africa to Asia. So basically, we are an anomaly because this 100 times bigger country invaded my small nation. I mean, that tiny is not. I mean, they always say the small, tiny country. Well, we are as big as average, normal countries, say, in Central and Eastern Europe. But of course, in comparison to whom attacked, we are small. They officially said, when the US government asked them in 2008, in the year 2008, what's their plans about Georgia, and this is, I know, official, and you can also read it in WikiLeaks if you are not in US public service, because they are not permitted to read this. But as an academic, you can read it. They officially said, what's the goal of your invasion into Georgia? The response of the Russians was full annihilation, complete annihilation of the country. Not of the government, but of the country. The same day, now my friend Nicolas Sarkozy will have lots of time to write memoirs, and I think he will again go back to this subject. There was a long conversation between him and Vladimir Putin, and Vladimir Putin specifically described to him in a very detailed anatomical way by which parts of my body he was going to hang me within the next few days. Basically, a few days later, then President Medvedev appeared on television and said, Saakashvili, who is Saakashvili? He's a political cadaver. And so basically, here I am, 4 years later, in the middle of the auditorium, and my country is supposed to be a total failure. And it's by all means, when you talk about where my country is, I again want to quote invaders of Georgia. A few days ago, former President, now Prime Minister Medvedev, who signed the occupation of Georgia regions, as Wolfgang has mentioned, said two ways. Of course, first he made a statement on Russian television saying we would like to imitate Georgian police reforms, but we cannot as a country. We are too big for that. And then second day he said, during his confirmation in Duma, well, we know that Georgia implemented very successful reforms. We know they're successful. We should, of course, learn from them, copy whatever they've done successfully, even if I, of course, hate Saakashvili. And that's the biggest paradox that unheard of in history, I think, and there are students of history here, when 100 times bigger country invaded another one, failed to depose the government, failed to take over it in its entirety, and 4 years later proclaims that, by the way, maybe we should learn from this government how to rule our own country. And that's the big survival story of a very amazing one, almost miraculous one of my country. I think this is a story which is not, we don't owe to military might or to particularly, like heroic leaders or anything like that. I think this happened because of radical transformation, because of reforms, because of real changes that we implemented in society that was doomed to be backward, that was doomed to be old-fashioned. You know, there is a recent, one of the biggest architectural magazines in the world. It has the cover story in Georgia on Georgian architecture. And I read articles there, and, you know, they're saying that, you know, this is one of the world's most interesting construction process. Absolutely new brand for a new country emerging with absolutely amazing new architecture. But, you know, all the efforts are saying, but, you know, it's not really Georgian, this architecture. It really doesn't fit their narrow streets and old-fashioned style and their, you know, their traditional psyche, as if we were doomed to be always in the Middle Ages, as if we were doomed to be always backward, as if we were to be some kind of nice, sweet country where people would arrive to see, like in some Himalayan resort, nice local traditions, nice things, remnants of the ruins from 9th, 8th, and 10th century, or even earlier, and say, oh, enjoy dancing and singing, which is a very old tradition, and say, oh, it's a nice country to see. But that's not what our aspiration is. We want to be, to learn from the others and to be ourselves role model for the region and maybe the rest of the world. And that's going on in Georgia, and it impacts our region in large. But I think I also here to share my optimism, and that idealism ultimately will prevail. And that force of ideas cannot be deterred either by old backward traditions, or so-called backward traditions. I think most of them are just invented, by idea of cultural relativism, that some people are just not capable of changes and successes. There is cultural handicap for some people, or even by authoritarian rule and brutality, or even by the force of money and corruption. I think it's based on our own experience. Georgia was one of the most corrupt places in the world. Georgia was one of the most criminalized places in the world. Georgia was one of the most hopeless and desperate places in the world. I'm basing it on real data from the pollings that had been done in Georgia, that have been done that was done 9, 10, 11 years ago. We had this thing that this country cannot be fixed. That was doomed and hopeless. So we did lots of reforms. New generation came to power after the Rose Revolution. And the list of reforms we did is absolutely amazing. We fired the entire police force, the entire customs office, the entire tax service. During the first year, half of our existing bureaucracy and civil service. We diminished the number of agencies by half. We scrapped 90% of licensing and permits requirements from the government. And as a result, and for a small country to present itself, benchmarks do matter. And you should see what the benchmarks of Georgia is. We have the world's fastest registration of companies, the world's fastest registration of property transactions. These are all IFC, the International Financial Corporation of the World Bank. The world's fastest customs procedure. We have according to the recent studies by EBRD and IFC, we have, in terms of perceptions, one of the lowest rates in Europe. That also means worldwide. We are at par with a couple of Scandinavian countries. We used to be one of the most criminalized societies in post-Soviet world. And we, according to the last 3-year survey of the European Union, right now are the safest country in Europe, the lowest crime rate in Europe. We are basically a safe society. 60 or 70% less crime than in Germany and France, 4.5 times roughly less than in Russia. And I think more important than this, I mean, also civil service has changed tremendously. I mean, there is this Canadian Center for Law and Justice, and together with Transparency International, they did studies worldwide, and they've ranked Georgian bureaucracy as second most efficient and transparent in the world after New Zealand. More important than these benchmarks, a mental revolution has happened. The way how people talk, relate to each other, how they relate to institutions, how they respect the institutions. You know, our police had 5% confidence rate based on Gallup polls. Now it has 90. It's higher. It's the highest in Europe right now. We had tremendous mistrust in other institutions. And actually, right now, every institution is more popular than the institution holder. I mean, I'm still quite a popular president, but institutional presidency is respected more than my personality. The same relates to parliament. It's much more popular than any particular parliamentarians. The same goes to government. The same goes to army. You know, say police has 90%. It's much bigger than, say, head of police or minister of interior. And so that's the institutional change that has happened. Georgia is as you rightly said, a small country, but it has hugely strategic location because it's a gateway from Central Asian, Caspian, energy-rich regions to most of the areas in Europe. It's also now a big transit route from Central Asia, Northern China, Afghanistan, also to most of the European destinations. And it's also, and then, you know, despite all the shortcomings and mistakes we might have made, still it has created a new alternative model of governance in post-Soviet space. The problem was that, you know, in the 90s, there were only two choices among former Soviet countries: to be messy, chaotic, crime-ridden, corruption-crippled, and with freedom of speech, like Russia of Boris Yeltsin, or to be more regulated, more orderly, and of course much more authoritarian, basically authoritarian, and like the regime created by Vladimir Putin. And there was no other third way for us. That was the popular assumption. And I think Georgia showed the third way. Of course, our democracy is not perfect, but we have certainly freedom of speech, of course, and freedom of elections, and freedom of civil society. And of course, there are many things to be still fixed, but we have very low crime rate, as I said. We have basically next to none corruption. 7 years ago, 8 years ago, in Gallup poll, 98% of Georgians said they've encountered corruption firsthand. Now, consistently 0.1, or they heard something about corruption, 0.1, 0.01 on some polls. Amazingly low. Basically, it disappeared. So from that point of view, you know, we have now kind of really big tourists to learn our reforms from different countries. Every other week we receive delegations from Kyrgyzstan, from Moldova, from Ukraine, from other neighbors, a lot of people coming from Russia to learn from our reforms. And that's something that really is very exciting. Because if ever those societies around us can also modernize, open up, become more normal, especially it relates to the Russian society, then all of us will be much better off. And from that point of view, it is an interesting gamble. And that's why, you know, Georgian survival and success shows that ideas can sometimes be stronger than tanks and even money. It is a message of hope for all freedom lovers of the world. You know, we are still not there. We still have elections now, 1 or 2, 3 years of elections. And again, we want to make them as transparent and as open as we can make them, despite against all the odds, because people are really focused on them. But I think still the fact, not the fact that I'm not abusing the fact that I'm here, I mean, it's not about personalities, but the fact that Georgia is still around and that it's being successful economically, visually transformed, mentally transformed, and it has become a shining example of success, at least for our region, which is not really seen from Washington or Brussels very well, but it's certainly very well seen in our region, also by the people who want to undermine it. This is a sign of hope, of course, primarily for us, but for all of you who want to be policymakers in the future. My advice would be, don't take anything at face value. defy things all the time, defy yourself, defy your own self all the time. That's also important, to reevaluate yourself critically all the time. And don't go for established dogmas, because usually they don't mean anything. And just go for it. Be daring, and everything will be fine.